Thank you for the feedback. Thank you, Chef. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the...
What was that?
It's a Swedish chef.
That's a Swedish
He said, thank you, chef.
Play it again. Play it again.
Do it again, yeah.
They're making a popcorn. They're making a popcorn. They're ready to send it.
It just sounds like someone talking to a puppy. You know, that's what it sounds like.
That's going to be the cold open now. Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Reaction, your weekly source for independent commentary on cultural news and politics, where it's always our mission to arm you with the tools that you need to cut through media misdirection and resist the mono-narrative. Today I would like to start out by thanking our members. We really appreciate you for supporting this show. We are growing really well, and it's all thanks to you. Please, if you want to support the show, go to humanreactionpod.com. There are links in the description below. And while you're here, please like, follow, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave us a review wherever you might be tuning in from. Today, I'm here with my friends and fellow conspirators in interesting commentary, David Rand, Kyle Mack, Bennett. My name is Joe Sheehan. David, what are we talking about today?
The James O'Keefe Samurai Swiper strikes again. Conan, the least intelligent agent at the Central Intelligence Agency.
Good? Better?
Holy shit, you nailed it. That was beautiful.
That was a terrible accent.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
wow.
James O'Keefe.
You need to be doing voice acting for South Park. That was great.
All right. The U.S. House also bent over backwards to stop those meanie college students from saying mean things about the state of Israel that are mean. So they passed the bill.
How dare you?
Is that Trump?
No, that was just me and being a sensitive little biatch. Okay, and then third, we don't have a third topic. So we're going to do a catch-up and an assortment of other issues, not because it was a slow news week, just because we're lazy.
Something we might call a smorgasbord for our friends in Sweden.
Let's not say that.
No, I'm not. It's not because we're lazy. It was just like one of those weeks, man.
Yeah.
It was one of those weeks.
No, it's an homage to our new friends.
Yeah.
We're calling it a smorgasbord. It's a new section we're doing in the show.
Well, before we get into all of that, okay. Sorry. I'm still
triggered.
I'm still having a flashback from the Japanese samurai.
James O'Keefe.
I love how you reach for the sword. You guys, this is too much fun.
Before we get into all of it, support us over on TikTok, where we just had our best clip that we've ever had, and an army of Swedes defending our honor right now, apparently.
Also attacking us. There's a little bit of both.
I like to think about the positive ones.
That's right. That's right.
Also, join our Discord, where we talk about news and all sorts of memes and stuff. Here's a little meme of us where we say idiotic statements and then we go, oh, wow, so many people are triggered.
That's exactly how this whole thing went. It is so funny because we have so many views, 100,000 views of the recording of this, which is twice as much of any other video we've ever gotten. But it's mostly hate views.
Hey, we'll take it, right? Juice the algorithm, baby.
Likes. But we have gotten lots of new followers.
Yeah. It's literally something like 80% Swedes.
Yeah.
In there, it's crazy.
Yeah. So we're relocating the podcast to Sweden. Bennett is going to go do some location scouting for us here in a month or so, and then we'll be following shortly behind. So he's
doing it on Tinder. That's how he's doing it. He's just moving his location.
Well, yeah. You got to just go on travel mode or whatever it's called. Location scouting.
I don't know if you've heard about the Human Reaction podcast, ladies.
That's a big deal.
I plead the fifth.
Yeah, we're going to send you with a bunch of swag. Stickers, pictures of us, signed press photos. If you are a small business owner looking for exponential growth, you have to connect with Adam Thuen at Intellectual Patriots. He will revolutionize your business game and help you get to the next level. Adam can streamline your business practices and advertising strategies to improve your bottom line. His expertise in data engineering means he can build you the systems you need to collect and analyze market data. His mission is to provide you with invaluable insights to fuel your success. From grant writing and business proposals to digital systems integrations, even AI management, Intellectual Patriots is a one-stop shop for cutting-edge solutions. Don't wait another second. Visit intelpatriots.com to learn more. That's INTEL patriots.com. This episode is brought to you by Revved Up Promo, the official apparel partner of Human Reaction. Revved Up is a premier full-service shop specializing in laser engraving, screen printing, and embroidery. Not only are they now making all of our apparel right down the road from us, they can do the same for your brand and ship it to you anywhere in the world. Revved Up helps you navigate the extensive universe of merch options and uses state-of-the-art techniques to showcase your brand in its very best light. So if you want to support our show and our generous sponsor, you can now do so by buying our merch and by turning to Revved Up Promo for your own custom apparel needs. Reach them at revveduppromo.com. That's with 2 V's and 2 P's, or just check the show notes for a link.
Anyways, let's jump into it, where we got James O'Keefe punking the CIA once again, right?
Yeah, this is the first time with the CIA, which is very interesting. But yeah, he got a date. Well, not James O'Keefe did, but a woman.
Who knows? It could be James O'Keefe.
We hypothecate, he's got a great Asian accent, if so, are guessing that it was a woman of Asian descent. That
sounds like it.
In this. Yeah, sounds like it, but who knows? Got the date with this guy, and he spills the beans on some pretty important stuff.
Director of National Intelligence, so I helped them stand their insider threat program. They trusted me to set that up.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Kate.
I don't have anyone to tell.
Yeah. This conversation didn't happen.
Of course.
I did strictly deny it.
This conversation didn't happen. Wow, he thinks he's so impressive.
I like that smile at the end.
It's a really gross smile.
Yeah.
That's
I
like
can't get it up now. There we go.
DeSantis
Phrasing.
smile. That's like the DeSantis smile at the end of the debates.
Yes, it is.
Put on smile.
But grosser.
Yeah, way grosser.
Yeah, so it's Ahmad Faisi, right? But he's a project manager, cyber operations of the Central Intelligence Agency. Had some interesting, got 7 million views on X as of, I think, yesterday or the day before. It might be even more now.
Yikes.
So what did he say in this video? What did he get caught saying?
So yeah, we can get into it, but the audio is pretty tough like that. But that's pretty much who it was. Like, he confirms everything that he's doing with as far as who he works for. That he was obviously, it's not on his LinkedIn profile that he works with the CIA, right? He's not an employee; he's a contractor of sorts, but he's an asset, or he's an agent, just like behind the scenes. But he, the big bombshell parts of this, right, are that he indicates that the CIA was spying on the Trump campaign, importantly, with FISA court approval. So just to remind everybody, because the FISA fight that we just had a minute ago, the FISA court is a secret court set up to kind of check the NSA and the intelligence agencies when they want to spy on foreign nationals, and that spying creeps into, domestic people. The all-eye argument is that you want like a neutral third party to look at what the executive branch is doing and place a check on them. But it's a secret court that has no public accountability to their decision-making process. So the question has always been, does FISA actually work, or is it largely, as Edward Snowden has pointed out, a captured agency of the intelligence apparatus with no real incentive to check the intelligence apparatus? And then if you have this, also confirming what we know, which was that the whole thing was an op, right? That the intelligence agencies were spying on the Trump campaign in 2016 based upon the premise of a research conducted and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign to get it through the process of approval in the FISA court. So that might have been a little hard to track, so let me try to restate that for the clarity.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton doesn't like Donald Trump.
Obviously.
Charters organization Fusion GPS, I want to say. Was that, am I remembering that right? To do this thing that became the Steele dossier, which is used to then go to the intelligence apparatus and say, hey, he's an agent of the Russian state. And then they use that made up evidence of that dossier to get it through the process so that they could then spy on his campaign.
Yeah.
Interestingly, this guy has now been fired too.
It was an interesting component of it because their press release said he doesn't work at the CIA. Right?
Yeah. And that's kind of the point, right?
Yeah.
He works for Deloitte and is getting contracted out to the CIA. At least from what he claims, he's been contracted to the NSA, he's been contracted to the CIA, and he's kind of floated around for the past like 2 decades in these spaces, right? But yeah, the CIA did put out an official statement on it.
But there's no doubt that he was working. Like the way the CIA words it, it makes it seem like he was never an employee at the CIA. When he has a badge with a very specific green bar to it that they're not supposed to have if they no longer work there. There's actually a part of where he literally shows this woman he's on a date with his badge, his CIA badge, and she says, "Well, there's no CIA on this."
He's like, "Well, that's the point."
That's the point, right? It's like it's nondescript. It's a spy agency, right? He's obviously doing it for the clout.
You know, I get serious like Simon vibes. Have you guys seen True Lies?
No.
With Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tom Arnold.
Dan sexy for me. That's the only part I remember.
Yep, that's the one. Well, Simon is like the guy who is like a used car salesman, but pretends to be a spy and like takes Arnold's wife, Jamie Lee Curtis in the movie, out on like dates and like tries to woo her with his like interesting spy life. And then, anyway, True Lies, great movie. An absolute staple of my childhood, or well, adolescence, perhaps.
He indicates that there are 2 directors of the CIA that withheld information from Trump, and that's a crime.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And it's unclear whether or not he's saying this as just talking out his ass, like repeating talking points, or if what he's saying is actual insider information from inside the intelligence community.
Which is the hard thing to gauge with a lot of these James O'Keefe honeypot date videos, right? Because it is a lot of like guys just trying to impress their dates, so they might be hyperbolic and
guys would not lie on a date, Kyle.
No, never. That would never happen, right? But regardless of that, it seems to be like he seems to have some ins on this.
Also, it's one data point, and we have corroborating evidence from Michael Schellenberger and Public's reporting, based upon tip-offs from inside the intelligence agencies, going as far as the deputy director of the CIA is on the record as saying, you know, doing things that were virtually illegal, right? Basically saying that he was instructed to, what was it, on the Biden laptop story, for example, to spike that story. So no small part of this. It's also the Five Eyes information that we talked about some time ago in relationship to the kind of setup to get the Trump campaign surveilled.
Yeah, well, because according to Schellenberger's reporting, they had told President Barack Obama's CIA Director John Brennan had identified 26 Trump associates for the Five Eyes to target. So there's 26 people that were and remember just going back all those 8 years ago, right, when Trump was saying that Obama's spying on my campaign, and everybody's like, "Oh, how crazy!" right? Yeah. And like the cuckoo, wild conspiracy theory, unsubstantiated, all this stuff, right? And now 8 years later, it's just like, well, yeah, obviously he was a threat to democracy. Yeah. We had to spy on him. Right.
And compare that to Watergate, which is another example, is the use of the Central Intelligence Agency to break into the Watergate Hotel to get access to files to spy on Nixon's opponent.
Of which everybody except for one of them was a CIA agent. They were like on the payroll of the CIA, which just... That gets conveniently left out.
and Navy intelligence, stuff like that. So Trump has responded to this revelation in the most Trumpian way possible.
Yeah, Trump is just being Trump here.
If this guy's for real, you ought to get rid of him. CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. This is not an intelligent guy to be openly talking to a woman that walks up and starts asking him questions and talking that way. So he may be bragging or showing off to some young lady. I have no idea the conditions under which he spoke, but I'd get rid of him real fast. If he's for real, get rid of him.
You are fired.
I have words. I have the best words.
Central Intelligence. He's not very intelligent
not
guy.
Very smart.
I just love how he just takes the opportunity just to insult the guy, right? Not
to address the real substantive stuff.
Which is just classic. Just classic Trump.
It would have been great if he would have been like, it's just such a missed opportunity. Really, is actually where I'm at on that. It's like he could have said, it's a terrible thing that my own people lied to me and put me in this terrible position where I couldn't get access to the information I should have. That's a crime. They should be prosecuted for it.
Yeah.
Right. But you know, whatever.
Is this just Trump being Trump, or is there a reason he's not saying those things?
I don't know. It's a good question. I feel like it's just like who the guy is. He's just reacting to the initial most media worthy part of it, which is this guy being a goofball. Right. Obviously, it also hedges a little bit too.
They could have brought him to a new skiff.
Another skiff?
He got Mike Johnson.
Yeah, he could have been brought to a new skiff and shown some new shit.
That's right. Craziness.
So what's interesting too is this guy is actually works for the China Mission Center at the CIA, which is a very interesting component of that because the China Mission Center, you remember that it was back in it was probably like 2017 when out of the China Mission Center, or not out of the State Department, basically saying, "Hey, China, they got caught basically saying, hey, Xi, don't worry about what Trump's saying. We're not going to go to war over Taiwan. None of these things. There was a very. Do you guys remember this story? It kind of circulated.
China, they love me.
No.
There was oh God, I got to bring it up then. I'm sorry, I just now connected the dots here.
Yeah,
so
I was actually just pulling up another thing I was connecting the dots for.
Yeah. So back in 2017, there was release that they had caught some back channeling of diplomatic communications around the president in his kind of trade war confrontation that was going on with China at that time, basically hedging the president's comments and what he was saying about South China Sea and Taiwan.
I do remember that. And there were generals, back channeling to the Chinese saying, if he were to do something like attack you, we would not carry out that order, right?
Yes, exactly. So this is an interesting thing because he's coming out of the, Chinese assertion kind of angle from the CIA that was created in 2021, right? Of course, after this, but obviously the CIA was interested at the time in the China connection. So another example of the kind of runawayness of the intelligence agencies in their sense that they are separate from the U.S. government and the real kind of masters and dominion of what goes on in the federal government.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kyle, what are you looking into?
Well, so because this guy worked for Deloitte, right? Which, for people that don't know, is one of the largest accounting firms. Just, it's taxation, auditing, risk advisory, all these types of stuff. And they've been around since the 1840s. They're old company. Make $65 billion in revenue every year. Big company, right?
Yeah.
And I was just scouting through their Wikipedia page, and it's pretty crazy how much things they have their hands in, right? But one of the things that caught my attention was, in 2007, Deloitte began hiring former employees of the Central Intelligence Agency for their competitive intelligence unit known as Deloitte Intelligence. And I just found an article that I was just reading through as Dave was explaining all that, talking about the secret history of Deloitte's espionage practices. And it documents kind of a whole series of accounts of corporate espionage, but also national intelligence stuff when it comes to these accounting firms, of coming in and using these accounting firms to be able to extract data on people and all that stuff. So there's an interesting tie-in that exists there that I haven't dug fully into, but you start to see how these entities might be used and why you have this crisscross that's happening between Deloitte and these intelligence agencies, right? Because remember, I believe the guy said that he worked for the NSA for 2 years too.
Yes.
So he's cross-pollinating across all these different orgs.
And
right?
you note that the other guy from OMG, a month ago, a couple weeks ago, he was also FBI, CIA, and kind of was bouncing around between these agencies. There was also an interesting, and I think this is if you're in, right, and you've been tracking this or you watch our podcast all the time, this is none of this stuff surprising to you, that there are private cutouts, that there's this interface between the Central Intelligence Agency and other kind of intelligence agencies and private actors, right, or non-governmental actors, right, like NGOs and things like that, or the mob and private government of the illegal sort. Like those guys and these central intelligence agencies. And the further you go back and the more that you know about it, the more it's obvious and everywhere. But just getting that information to the general public is such a huge barrier, right? Because it feels conspiratorial. It feels like it can't be real. It can't be true that there are, private companies in America that, have people on their paywall roll specifically to cover for spies so they have a cover story.
Well, and that seemed to be what was happening with Twitter when we see, again, Schellenberger's reporting. Yes. Just because he's everywhere, he seems to be the best journalist of our time right now on the reporting of the Twitter files, is that you had FBI agents on payroll that were doing all sorts of shenanigans, right?
I think, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, I think that's the point of what I might call pre-programming, David.
Wait,
right? of making it seem impossible and unrealistic that these, things that should be in a spy movie or a novel are actually playing out in real life. We're not going to go down the rabbit hole of debating pre-programming.
You just tried to open up a rabbit hole.
I mean, and I'm happy to.
He's just here's a rabbit hole, but we're not going down that.
People don't believe it because it's like, this is so crazy. This should be in a James Bond movie.
I just think that's normalcy bias, though. I don't think because that there are. We know that the CIA, for example, has a tremendous influence on Hollywood, right? And in fact, you go to the CIA's webpage; they have a webpage about all the great movies they've made.
So if you were in a position to want to lead people astray to think that people were, God damn it.
Most of that stuff is aggrandizement, though. It's like, look how cool we are. Join the CIA, right? It's like, the spy novels. I don't think that. It's two ways, right? I think there's an inherent interest in spy novels, right? James Bond and things like that, are interesting action figures, and they feel like a real world and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's an op, per se, right? It could just as well be just people looking at interesting and entertaining.
Sure, but if you were in a position of wanting to make it seem ridiculous that your actual operation existed, why not you leverage the media you're heavily connected to?
The DOJ does give massive multi-million-dollar grants to large Hollywood projects.
Yes, but that doesn't indicate that the pre-programmed thesis, if I understand it right, and maybe we're moving the goalposts, or I've always misunderstood it.
Sure.
But I thought it was to create compliance by foreshadowing what's about to happen, right? Not to create that's why it's pre-programming, not just programming, right?
Sure.
So you say, people will say, that there was like a novel that came out that suggested that airplanes might be flown into the World Trade buildings.
Well, that was in 24, the TV show.
Yeah. And that was an intentional effort by the agencies to get people to be able to accept the fact that it would happen on 9/11.
Right. I think this is less that and more just like, hey, we're going to work to kind of cover our tracks and make it seem ridiculous that these kind of things could be happening in real life because they seem like a spy novel.
How would you tell the difference between that and just regular normalcy bias, though?
I don't know, but I'm thinking of just from first principles of if I was in a position of being in an intelligence agency and I wanted to cover up what it was that I was doing or make it seem ludicrous, which we know that they do to discredit other people, right?
Yeah.
That they want to marginalize. I would certainly leverage culture and media to obfuscate what it is I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could. I think you do that through, things like Project Mockingbird or what they're doing with, placing people in media organizations who have relationships with the CIA. We know that there are press people at CNN and things like that who are literal former spies.
Why not do all of the above?
Yeah, I'm saying we have evidence and reason to believe that those are a tactic. And then I think going to the place where that there is what they're doing with having media that says they do ridiculous stuff, right? That therefore they're kind of undermining that, right? To create a narrative that would enforce normalcy bias. I'm not sure that we have a reason to believe that, right? Because it could because to me, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between that and just people's propensity to just assume things are okay or things are being run okay, right? If you're not connected to these sorts of narratives, these sort of facts, right? If your entire interface with the history of American government is your 8th grade history lesson, well, then why would you believe that? If you weren't told about the CIA's operations, why would you believe that they're doing all these things, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But it's also a way that people can connect it to something that they know to be fictitious and dismiss it offhand. Maybe it's not intentional that they're doing that, but it is certainly an avenue through which pressure that could be applied to acts that are actually happening from the public to the entities in our government that aren't accountable to us. That pressure is released by basically saying, oh, well, that's ridiculous. This couldn't be happening because that's something I would read in a Tom Clancy novel and just forget about it.
Right. So it's like their existence of the Tom Clancy novel undermines it. I don't know. I think I could.
We don't need to go super like we've already gone so far left brain on this.
Right,
it does not matter, but I just think it's an interesting case.
Yeah, I guess the idea that it doesn't seem like a Tom Clancy novel, that the idea that the CIA would lie to the president.
It doesn't
and withhold information. No.
Do you think that's like something that you would expect?
No. I think it just seems like a corruption problem that a deep state apparatus would have, right? Like that's what seems like one of the things you would do if you're doing it. In fact, we know that generals did that when it came to pulling troops out of Syria.
Yeah,
right.
But again, you identified that there are people who base their governmental worldview on their 8th grade civics class.
Well, and the mythology here is that the president has like supreme authority over the CIA and things like that, right?
Correct.
When right now it couldn't be farther from the truth, really.
Oh, absolutely not. And your worldview is so far more informed that these are things that you kind of can accept as reality because they're well substantiated with a lot of evidence that you're privy to that most people are not. So
well, and it goes into because a lot of the conspiratorial thinking, a lot of like kind of the anti-conspiratorial thinking, don't go in too deep into conspiracy rabbit holes and things like that. There's like, you really think that there's like a bunch of people that are manipulating things about behind the scenes and all this stuff, and it's like the further you dig into things like this Deloitte story here with this guy, or just the mountains of evidence that you keep having coming over and over and over again, it's hard not to notice that there's a certain type of cabal-like nature that is operating behind the scenes, kind of outside of the government, and is using the government towards certain ends, right?
Yeah.
Or multiple factions. Like it doesn't have to be a singular cabal, like a centralized cabal.
Yeah.
It could be multiple, right? Like different types of, you could almost think of them like fraternal orders, right? Where you have a bunch of people with a common interest and they're moving things in a certain direction, and they're all in different types of industries, public and private. They're all networked together. They're all moving things towards certain ends. You know, it's not like they have necessarily one glorified wahahaha goal, but it's like they're like a cultural force.
Yeah,
there's a cultural kind of milieu that exists in that world, right?
Yeah, and their primary goal, if there is one, centralized or decentralized, is to perpetuate their own existence and further entrench their own power and influence, right? Because that's the nature of anything.
Well, of power, especially, right?
Yeah,
like and it's corrupting and all those kind of things.
Well, and you should just think of these things like there's like opposing mafias or opposing cults that are all kind of working towards certain ends, and they're just using these as tools. They're using these different governmental systems as tools. They're using these corporate entities. They're using things like ESGs towards their end, and they're constantly shifting and moving and developing new strategies on how they can achieve their ends. You know, right? It's not as simple as just like a singular Illuminati force or whatever. Right?
Yeah,
for sure.
And he actually reinforces that view in the released tapes, where he says that the NSA holds information from the CIA and vice versa.
Yeah,
right. And that's actually why the Department of Homeland Security was created in the first place, was in order to stop that from happening and create a more cohesive internet information sharing between the agencies.
Well, the CIA itself is supposed to be that. It's supposed to be the place where all information flows to. Like, it's supposed to be the thing to sift out all of the different informational pieces. But if the NSA is not willing to share with the CIA, like it shows that even if you kind of believe in the entire apparatus, it shows like something's not working there, right?
Well, what would be the justification or incentive for the NSA not to share something with the CIA?
Territory.
Yeah, it's like a turf war, and that's the way that the guy kind of describes it in the thing. Is it's like a turf war.
Because they're like, that's our specialty. We're on this case. We're doing this. Like you've seen the cop movies. It's like, this is our jurisdiction.
They want the clout of like catching the bad guy.
And the FBI is doing the same thing. In fact, we know that was part of one of the problems with the 9/11 case, right? Is that the CIA wasn't talking to the FBI about that guy who was doing lessons in flying planes into buildings in Florida, right?
What a convenient excuse.
Yeah. Well, all right. Yeah, it could be the cover up, or it could just be straight up incompetence. It's hard
for sure. Absolutely.
So do you guys want to? So another part of this is just how broad and problematic it is for Congress. We have Matt Gaetz on the phone. I think it's actually a Twitter space with James O'Keefe, who I wanted to have this in here in part to give both Gaetz, who's been doing a lot of great work on the Government Accountability Committee that has been pursuing this stuff, and hopefully we'll get a letter out of them requesting more information on this guy here soon. But here's him talking about how broad the problem is with this spying regime.
Because as jarring as it is, it is part of a constellation of facts that we've uncovered in the Judiciary Committee and in the Weaponization Subcommittee, that there is an effort underway to try to shape the nature of truth itself by shaping what can be seen and what can be received, particularly by those in power. And there's a cabal in Washington that want to control the access to information, both upward to decision makers and downward to the populace. I was listening earlier and someone asked the question, well, do you think they're doing this to President Biden as well? Yes. This is not a partisan issue. The way the intelligence community works around here is frightening, and oftentimes we see manifestations now where it's directed at the right. But, you know, I believe that the right approach with what we have on tape.
Yeah, so like as far as it kind of reinforces, you know, that Matt Gaetz is a serious person, right? He's working with the Government Accountability Committee on the weaponization of government, saying that there is a group of people who want to control the narrative. That's what the censorship industrial complex is. This guy is a cybersecurity expert working with the CIA, right? Now, they say he was more internal vetting is one of the things. He was like vetting new CIA recruits and assets and stuff like that. But an interesting component of that, right? That they see this as their tool, their domain, their space to dominate the information scene.
The CIA issued a statement on this after this guy was let go, I believe.
Yep.
And do we have that to play? Had we talked about playing that? Because I thought it was, well, it was interesting how obviously not forthcoming they were. They were very careful in their language.
Was it strange? It's strange that they responded at all, right? I mean, one, it's funny because Oki's like, I didn't even know the CIA had a press secretary. He's like, it's a very strange thing to have as your spy organization. Honestly, you know, we can listen to it if you want, but to me, it was kind of a nothing burger. I mean, it was basically a bunch of, it's what you do, what you're supposed to do in a press release. Give them nothing while denying everything. And especially if you're a spy agency, you're literally paid to lie. The guy says everything they do is steal information and lie. That's what we pay him to do, right? So like that, that's the insane thing.
That's like his exact words. Like that's a quote. Is everything is about we steal it, baby. Like that's what he said. We steal it, baby.
Yeah. The absurdity of being like, we're going to get the truth out of their press person when press people are the people who you pay to lie for you.
I think it's just that what wasn't said was more interesting than what was said.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like very clearly they're not going to give you a straight answer because that's what they're designed to do. Of course, anyone who's in communications or PR is going to be very tightly scripted with what they can tell you, especially the CIA.
Yes.
But yeah, very odd that the CIA does have like a press office. But I guess they have to do some kind of like public relations work, right? Particularly around stuff like this, because this is happening all the time now.
Especially,
maybe they just hired her. They're like, shit, we need somebody. We need some help here.
Well, if we want to look at it, Bennett just gave me a timestamp, so it's only about 30 seconds here. But yeah, here is, I guess, what they said to James.
We would like to know, has this individual been terminated in the last 48 hours as a result of what we've uncovered?
The only on the record that I have for you right now is the statement that I've provided.
Okay.
It may be attributed to CIA spokesperson.
Okay. Obviously, the individual being terminated as a result of these findings would be newsworthy. Can you get back to us on that?
The only thing that I am comfortable saying on the record is what we've provided.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty typical concept.
Right. But he was fired.
Yeah.
And like immediately
after.
after.
Probably, yes. Yes.
Don't we know that for sure?
Well, once again, what's the difference between an asset and an agent?
And once an asset, always an asset.
Well, and an agent, right? So if he works for Deloitte and he was a contractor and he claims to be a contractor and he has a badge, did they just take his badge away? Was he paid under the table?
Yeah,
right?
they could just deprive him of his clearances, but say, well, he was never employed by us, so we couldn't fire him.
Yeah, right. We canceled his contract. We didn't fire him. You know, like those sorts of games. Additionally, that
then he just shifts into a new apparatus.
Yeah, right. He just goes to the FBI.
Yeah. And then on top of that, think about it. If you get income from the Central Intelligence Agency, how do you claim that on your taxes?
Do you even pay taxes? Do you exist? Do you have a social security number anymore? Do
It's
you
just
have
one of those.
fingerprints?
It's one of those peculiar problems. So I don't. It's everything's deniable on purpose. So that's why it would all take that.
Guys, maybe we should get jobs at the CIA. Maybe we should become CIA contractors. We could be a mouthpiece. We could be some sort of like.
Isn't that what Bennett's
Bennett,
here for?
can you put in a good word for us?
Yeah, like come on.
I'll polish up my resume.
the fifth.
I think that could be great. Could be a great way to fund the show too.
For sure.
You know, bottomless money. Imagine all that Pentagon money.
Imagine infinite money for the show. That'd be great.
Oh man, golden toilets over here.
Just golden toilets. For the record, for people that don't know that historically, is there was something like some absurd amount that was paid at the Pentagon for a golden toilet, like
in Iraq or something.
Yeah, it was like 10 grand or something. But there's a lot of those types of things that happen where you're just like, oh, okay, that's probably black budget accounting stuff, right?
So if you ever see a vast jump in our production value, you know we've gone to the CIA. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Zesty Beverages. They're on a mission to unf the standard American diet by crafting drinks with fewer calories and more nutrients from real food. Their lineup of delicious offerings now includes Electric Peak Yerba Mate, postbiotic sodas, keto-friendly, ready-to-drink margaritas, and hard teas. Wondering what a postbiotic soda is? Well, head on over to zestybev.com to learn more and find a retailer near you. Once again, check them out online at zestybev.com. That's ZESTYBEV.com.
All right. So this week, additionally, the House passed a new anti-Semitism law of sorts. It's a very interesting result of all of the campus drama that's happened that we covered last week and talked a little bit about, with a Republican and a Democrat came together, pushed kind of like a bill that was already in holding for some time, adding to Title IX of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a new definition of anti-Semitism to be enforced on college campuses. Yeah, so that happened.
What is the definition? The new definition? Do we have that?
Oh, we're going to get into that in just one moment.
Right.
First, we got to get the cue up on the problem as stated by Tom Cotton on the problem going on campuses.
And no, this is not Saturday Night Live.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America, and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks.
Ooh,
the terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran.
What?
Yeah.
Did he just compare like college kids who don't even know what they're protesting to the Ayatollahs?
You weren't a liar.
That has so much SNL feel to it. Does it not?
does. The entire
What is it about the lighting?
like it.
There's something about the lighting.
I expected a studio audience to start laughing at some point.
Right, the whole time.
Just the whole the whole feeling here just feels like that. It's very SNL cold open.
It's like this is someone acting as Nancy Pelosi over here in the on the left.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
Little Gaza, some staffer was really proud of that one.
Well,
crushed it.
And what that's referencing is rather than just a protest for a day, they really are taking on a very specific strategy for their protests, which is a camp-in of sorts, very Occupy Wall Street-ish sort of thing, where they've taken, and then additionally has a lot of references and kind of like mythological images to the 1960s and campus protests back then, where they took over student buildings. There has been violence for sure. There's been, harassment for sure, and a lot of mean words, definitely. But we have like kind of still the framing of it as, as we spoke earlier about pre-programming the CIA, Morning Joe covering this whole thing to get you the right setup of how the normies are thinking about it.
Well, the House Rules Committee voted yesterday to advance a bipartisan bill that would codify the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism into Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The legislation is being led by Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, who joins us now, along with Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz of Florida. He is co-sponsor of the bill. Gentlemen, thank you for being on this morning. Congressman Lawler, I'd like to start with you to tell us more about the bill and what you hope to accomplish with this in a bipartisan effort.
Well, I think, Mika, what we're seeing on college campuses right now is a failure to act and a failure to lead. And part of the problem is the lack of a very clear definition of anti-Semitism. And so what this bill would do is force the Department of Education to adopt the IRA working definition and its contemporary examples for all of its Title VI discrimination enforcement cases. And I think defining it very...
Yeah, so that's a good way to summarize it as for bill sponsor, right? It says the Department of Education, when considering questions of the enforcement of their rules, and remember, Title IX is Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's when it comes to funding women's sports, can't discriminate against college students based upon race, things like that. That's Title IX, right? And it's adding to that a specific new definition based upon the International Holocaust Remembrance Group. Real quick, what are they before we get into the definition? They are an international body founded by the Prime Minister of Sweden. Do the sound. No, okay.
I don't have it up.
Oh, man.
Our favorite people.
They're the best people.
Some of them are great. Okay, so composed of the international partners, UK, EU, USA, Israel. And it's basically meaning foreign governments now get to tell us what anti-Semitism is. That's how it works. So what is the definition? Well, the interesting thing here, and you really got to pay attention to the words that he used back there, which is their working definition, not a concluded definition, but a working definition.
It's a unique hate that mutates.
This is a draft.
Keep that in mind throughout this conversation. The mutates and like how many doors are left open on this as it goes.
Well, I was just thinking of Barclay this whole time. I was like, if they put an actual definition on it, are they going to freak out?
Yeah, right.
Because it's no longer a unique hate once you have a defined definition. Right?
Oh,
right.
Interesting.
So you have this definition, which I think is pretty reasonable. Basically, the rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities, right? It's hatred of Jews, right? Okay, but the question is, he says that and their modern applications, which is below it. Right.
Well, hold on. Yeah. There's a piece right at the top that I think is interesting that you point out, being broad. The definition here is, quote, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. I mean, obviously there are like very clear examples of that, but that does seem pretty vague, doesn't it?
Well, no, I mean, once again, like it's like one of those, if you're saying, it's a difficult question. I agree with anyone trying to narrow it down. It's trying to capture both Jews are controlling all the banks and all the institutions and all the media, right? And trying to cover Jews are subhuman people who do it. Because that's like this weird dichotomy that is anti-Semitism, right? In like the worst forms of it and the dumbest forms of it.
Yeah, because the most traditional sense of like what racism is typically the subhuman category. It's like you believe that a certain race should be subjugated, or you believe that a certain race is subhuman, like they're literally lesser human or like half a human or something like that in comparison to whatever like the other races.
Like the Irish.
Yeah.
Clearly the best, obviously.
Which shout out to the people in Ireland right now going through some crazy stuff.
Yeah, right.
But yes, and that's where like it isn't like the general definitions of racism, because anti-Semitism is just racism but more specific, right? Like that's
against a specific part of the Jewish community that was in Europe at that time and continues in America today in various different forms, like in white nationalism, stuff like that. It still exists. The question is like where the edges of that are, right? For example, when you apply that to modern and historical things, it becomes, okay, when are we doing something that is just commentary, noticing, or when is it like real regular speech that people are talking about when it comes to criticizing the state of Israel? Sure. And that remains because of their applications of what he specifically says. That's the crazy thing. there are so many wild things about this bill. Not only is it because it's adding this in here, but because it very specifically adds the additional modern contextualization, such as accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than the interests of their own nations, right? So it's true that historically that could be a problem, right? But the question is what if someone actually is a Mossad agent, right? All right.
Sure, yeah.
All right.
Here's something that I would have violated on this podcast a few weeks ago, I'm sure. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, example, by claiming that the existence of State of Israel is a racist endeavor. So
Right.
if you claim that the project, the ethno-state project of Israel is a racist endeavor, that is anti-Semitic.
Right. And there's the Jewish historian that debated Norm Finkelstein just a little while ago made exactly this claim in support of Israel. He says the goal is to be in a Jewish state, so we can't have too many Arabs.
Yeah, like
because we're also democracy. That's his whole case.
The Zionist goal is an ethno-state. Like that shouldn't be controversial to say that. Like that is the goal of it. Right?
Well, and the last point here,
But they're also democracy, right? So, like, if you're a democracy and an ethno-state, how do you do that? Well, you can't have too many of the wrong kinds of people there.
Okay, and to that point, the very last bullet point here, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, is that not kind of what the Nazis were trying to accomplish?
Well, it's also
state.
it's also part of a debate tactic.
They already
Like
were
when there
ethno
was that zero hedge debate with Dave Smith and Dennis Prager, that was constantly a topic of discussion. Was the moral equivalency with the Nazis, right? So that is like that's like an entrapment tool.
And also, it's such a common, stupid thing we do in the West is just like everyone's a Nazi all the time. Like you're a Nazi, everyone's, like that sort of thing. So it's like, it's very specific. You could say that, but you can't say about Israel. Then it's anti-Semitism, right? Which is one of the challenges to this because Israel's a state, not necessarily a people group, right? It's complicated. Like, and they want to have it both ways, right? They want to say, oh, well, there are plenty of Arabs in Israel. They have rights there and all that kind of stuff. But if you criticize them, you're criticizing based on the fact that they're Jewish.
I did see, I remember seeing a Charlie Kirk tweet saying that, did this law just make parts of the Bible illegal? And I think this rule right here would be that, right? Is it'd be anti-Semitic to claim that the Jews killed Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe you can say they technically didn't, but they did turn him into Pontius Pilate, right?
And they very specifically requested another guy get the crucifixion rather than him.
They didn't put the spear in his ribs. They just gave him to the people that did.
Oh, there's so many jokes I could make right now. But I'm not
but there's no doubt. So one of the questions is, and this is a real part of the history of anti-Semitism for sure, claiming that modern Jews today are responsible for the death of Jesus is like a whole nother thing. Now that's an incredibly low IQ Christian take, obviously.
Well, it's equivalent to saying that modern day like white Americans are responsible for slavery or something.
Right,
like that,
right.
It's just like
it's that. It's also like it actually is terrible theology. Like the whole point of Jesus' sacrifice is to redeem the sins of mankind. It's all of mankind's sins. He's a universal savior.
Yeah, it's supposed to be it's supposed to be that now there's no longer a focus on this special group of people. Now it's everybody, right? Like it's supposed to be a universalism that that comes in with the Christ.
So like blaming the Jews specifically is a tactic of weaponizing Christianity in anti-Semitic directions. That said, the way they word it here is not that, right? And that's just to criticize specifically Israel, not Jews or Israelis, right? Using these symbols to criticize Israel or Israelis is the challenge with that. So that's what's in. Go ahead.
So this bill that this language is in, right? Like these guys were talking about, is it passed into law?
No, it passed the House.
It passed the House.
It's yet to have passed the Senate.
Okay.
It's going to.
So if it were to pass, what would its implications be?
So this is part of my challenge too. Is I think
get canceled.
No. Because
we're going to jail.
That's the kind of the impression you would leave if you just kind of consume this off Twitter, right? Which is like, this is a speech law. It's not really. It has speech implications, but it's actually a college funding law. Title IX is about if you're
Title
getting...
VI.
Sorry.
Title IX is women's college sports, I think, right?
Yeah, sorry. Title VI is also about college, about universities and their federal funds. So this says if you get access to a university, to federal funding of any kind, you have to obey certain rules to keep access to those things. And they might even go after your prior funding by lawsuit if you don't. So if you have the wrong codes and stuff like that, or if you enforce your student codes contrary to this. So what this says is that they now have to consider a new part in their student codes, which is this new definition and its contemporary examples. It isn't that it doesn't actually say you have to enforce this against someone's speech, but what it'll probably result in is universities censoring speech by the chilling effect. Universities don't want to have their money taken away, so they're going to be policing speech to make sure that it can't be accused of them. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure.
So it isn't that this bill, and this is the tomfoolery of the bill sponsors are playing. Like if you watch their debates and stuff like that, they say, "Oh, there's a part in the bill that says it can't be extrapolated to, it shall not be interpreted to limit the First Amendment rights." But the problem with that is that that's not what universities are responsible for. That's just what the government is responsible for, is the code. So what the universities are going to be most afraid of is that by being accused of enabling anti-Semitism, they're going to have our federal funding yanked, and then they'll lose all this money. So they're going to crack down. That's the danger.
Yeah.
Additionally, I've never seen code before that said, we're going to adopt the rules of some international body for our definitions.
Yeah.
See how code usually works is you have a section in code that defines a bunch of things, and then things refer back to that consistently. That way your code is consistent.
Sure.
Right? So you'll have the definition of a motor vehicle license or a motor vehicle operator that you'll refer to repeatedly throughout different parts of regulating motor vehicles or laws around that, right? This is the only time I've ever seen, go to this website and find out what the definition is in code, right? Additionally, the fact that it's a foreign government bodies actually determine this, which is a sovereignty question that's very interesting.
Very concerning.
And then additionally to that, just the sheer content of specifics when it comes to speech, I think is very unique. That doesn't really exist anywhere else, right? So, for example, you can't discriminate against black people, but it doesn't say anywhere in the code around black people what you can and can't say that would be considered discrimination. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It just says universities can't discriminate.
Yeah.
Well, and here's Matt Walsh. He has a big long thread on this, but he has a very specific example of this right here. He has a picture of the law here, and it says includes the contemporary examples of anti-Semitism identified in the IHRA definition. But he has a commentary here. The bill also specifies that the examples of anti-Semitism that IHRA subjectively came up with will be included in the legal definition. What happens when IHRA adds new examples? Well, I guess the legal definition changes. Why is some organization being given this kind of legal power? That is never explained by anyone involved in writing this, and it gets worse. And he goes on into more stuff here.
So question, just a point of clarity on things, because we know obviously where Ben Shapiro lands on this, been very outspoken. We know where Candace Owens falls on this, Candace former Daily Wire. Matt Walsh, also at Daily Wire. Where is he falling on this whole conversation? In step with, the Shapiro contingent of Daily Wire,
Shapiro
or outside of that?
Bill.
Shapiro opposes the bill.
Yeah. He opposes it.
And what are his grounds?
So
for
he opposes it on the grounds of, what did he say? He thinks all Title VI should be not relevant anyways. We need to defund all public universities functionally. Yeah.
So where would Matt Walsh fall on this?
Well, he's opposing the bill very specifically, and I bet he agrees with the overall sentiment that we shouldn't have Title VI at all.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and who knows how much of this is saving face after the whole Candace Owens thing too. I think Matt Walsh is principled on this type of thing. Like, he is generally free speech stuff here, but I bet if you just went into some of Shapiro's stuff, like, I bet there would be like this. It's a very easy thing to say that you're like, oh, this violates free speech, right? Like, it's a very easy thing to say, but when push came to shove, I imagine he would probably, if it mattered for his voice to take the other side,
he probably would.
I have a hunch he would.
He might. Yeah.
I have a hunch he would.
Sure.
But all this relates around, like, if you need this to be a hate that mutates, you'd want to give it to an international body that you don't need to pass new laws to control, to very specifically to create a hate that mutates, right? For your definition of anti-Semitism. So
what are some of the other voices in Congress saying about all this?
Well, basically, I mean, it passed 320 to 91, so there's not that many voices. Most of the people who voted against it were Democrats, honestly. It's only about 20 Republicans voted against it.
Yeah, you have like the common figures, like Thomas Massey were opposed to it, right? Like the people that you would expect to be principled free speech advocates, right? Like they were on the correct side of this, in our opinion, the correct side.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, this was bipartisan across the board.
Yeah.
Well, and what are your guys' takes? I mean, like, so these protests that are happening, are they legitimate? Are they hateful? I'm sure there are components of both. What are your guys' takes?
Well, I mean, I said this last podcast where I think protests in general are usually net negative. Like I think like 5% of the time they're extremely useful, but most of the time they actually just kind of muddy the waters and they don't really help your movement. That's kind of where I think a lot of this is right now. I'm not convinced that, especially with the types of people that are doing the protesting. Like it's like I said last podcast, it's very difficult when you have a lot of these left-wing, like kind of left-wing, what would you call them? Like the Antifa type of style of left-wingism. They usually, I think, cause more harm than good in these movements. I think it becomes very easy for just like a normal person to be like, yeah, I don't agree with those people, just based off of like how they're going about it, not necessarily with the with what the message itself is, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I always think it's the action is in the reaction. So once you get campus police shooting rubber bullets at protesters, which I got some video of, very interesting to watch, you're going to get a blowback. That blowback is going to stir your left wing, your activist left wing in the country, who are there now awake and paying attention and watching what's going on, right in time for Biden to say, I'm going to forget all the student loans and all these kind of, rhetorical components. You go ahead and play.
So you could say that there are some election implications to the timing of this,
right? So it's domestic, and then once you kind of see videos like this,
and for people that are just listening, you got police firing rubber bullets right now.
He shouldn't have been standing there.
And it's not that, and it's not to say that no one would deserve a rubber bullet in this case. These are very devastating. Keep that in mind. Like it's not an airsoft gun. It'll break bone.
Well, the problem with, because a lot of these protests, like I am seeing basically riots forming. They're like small scale still. It's not.
And it's always a question
elevated to a certain degree. But then you also have people chanting like "Death to America" and things like that.
Yeah.
And that causes like those things hinder your movement when you do those types of things.
Well, unless the goal is to create a police response that then does this. Now the question is it free speech to say "Death to America"? Right? Are you saying is there a difference between "Death to America" and saying "I want Americans to die"? Is American ideal?
I would say I would consider there to be a difference between those.
Yeah.
It's much like saying "from the river to the sea" because it's a very specific homage to Iran. Like that's what the "Death to America" thing is.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, and
it's very much
what
like
they mean
"from the river to the sea"
American empire or things like that. They don't mean their grandma who's American, right? They're not mean your grandma. Maybe they do. It's hard to know, but that's the thing about speech is the vagaries of that. We need the space to be able to say, okay, so what do you mean by that? In order to actually say, okay, what we have here is someone who's doing provocative language that is a direct threat to somebody. That's the constitutional standard, right? Where it's someone who's saying something with the intent and the direction to harm somebody. Say, hey, go burn down that building.
Well, I just the reason why I said the Iran thing, just to be very specific about that, is I am very critical of the people that are kind of just like giving homage to some other country for whatever their political purpose is. And like, I feel the same way about the "Death to America" being an homage to Iran as the people that are like Israel first, no matter what, all the time with this. Like, I feel the same way. Like I disagree with, I think all of these people are idiots.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing.
That's exactly right, Kyle. That's what's so interesting about this. This is all about something happening on the other side of the goddamn planet.
Exactly.
And it only has something to do with it because we give them Israel billions and billions of dollars, paying a tremendous foreign and domestic cost for these things. And what are we getting out of this? What are we getting out of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely nothing.
Like I would care a lot more about the Israel, like the Israel-Hamas stuff or the Israel-Palestine stuff. The reason why I think it's interesting is because the effects it has on American politics. Mm-hmm. I'm not actually that interested in what's going on the other side of the world for itself. Like I'm much more interested on the cultural impact that it has in our country, like the cultural impact, right? And the fact that we're just giving blindly billions of dollars to Israel and all these things when I just don't think that we should be doing that, right? But like it's not actually the land or like the religious ideas that everybody has around the space that I'm even really interested myself in.
Right.
Right.
And if it didn't pay tremendous cost, we know that the 9/11 hijackers were primarily motivated by our actions in support of Israel. We're seen as the same state by most of the Middle East. Why? Because we've given them billions and billions of dollars, and then pretty much said if anyone does anything about it, no matter what they do, they're always right and they always are on the good side. That therefore this state, not the Jewish people, this state called Israel is forever, a 51st state of the American Union, according to those people. And they're seeing it. I think they're seeing it fairly clearly, in the sense that that's kind of how we treat them. So when we do that, it inspires terror attacks against us. Right. And that cost is a big deal. Right. Not to mention the treasury cost, right? Just the billions of dollars that we can't afford.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I wish we could just focus on domestic policy, but we are the empire, or at least we're the cultural center of the empire. So we have to focus on all these things that are happening abroad. Yeah. Just because that's the nature of the beast that we're living in right now. But like, it would be awesome if we could just, stop all the foreign entanglements and just focus on domestic policy. But that's just not where we're at the empire state right now.
Right.
And do you think if the United States did that, would that diffuse the protests and the conflict that's happening domestically over these issues?
Yeah,
is it about
we
the
wouldn't
money?
be involved in them. Well, I don't necessarily know if it's
because I think a lot
things
of
around. It would be Israeli students saying we need to get America involved in this foreign conflict.
But let's just assume for a second that that's not our role, and that's well accepted that that's not the role of the United States government to fund anyone else other than us.
Yeah.
Does that diffuse this, or because obviously there are people involved in these protests who are concerned about the humanitarian aspects of this, right? Like people being shelled and innocent people and all of the death and destruction that's going on. Do you think that would solve what's going on college campuses?
There's humanitarian problems happening all over the world. The more interesting question to me is why is this very specific one the one that we have to super hyper focus on, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because that's where you start to see the nature of propaganda is what are the things that you're supposed to pay attention to, like that the entire empire kind of forces you to pay attention to. That's what matters. Because like we could look at humanitarian crisis happening in all across Africa if we wanted to, but nobody cares.
Yeah, and they weren't doing this. They weren't doing this in Yemen, despite the Americans' direct involvement in the Yemen starvation blockade for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
So biggest humanitarian crisis of the last decade has been Yemen.
Yes.
But nobody really cared about that except for some fringe libertarians, right?
Like me.
Does the survival and continuation of the American empire rely upon the support of the American people? Does it rely on
God, no.
All these people?
No one wanted that bill to pass. From last week.
Yeah, right.
It has nothing to do with the will of the American people.
So we're basically not being represented by our government in any way, shape, or
you're
form.
A tax
it's just
cow.
continuing to do whatever its interests.
I love it when you play devil's advocate. No, we're tax cows, Joe.
You're playing the layman.
I'm not advocating anything. I'm just asking questions.
I know you're not.
You're advocating devilry.
You're doing exactly the right job to do it. No, you're right. We're tax cows. They don't care about us. We only care in the most abstract sense possible because the average American simply is just disconnected. Right? They just don't. I mean, they're just trying to pay their bills, man. They don't know where inflation comes from or where the empire is leading them.
Well, one of the interesting points that I hadn't even really thought about until we started talking about this was the international body thing of that being used for our definition in the law, because it really, I think, symbolizes what's happening with the empire as a whole right now, where the way I was waiting for that. As soon as I said it, I'm like, Bennett's gonna.
It's been a while.
Because it really showcases where we're at right now, where it might even be better not to necessarily think about it as America, but I tend to view America just as the cultural centerpiece of a much larger apparatus, which is like you might call that NATO, you might call that, but it's just like the Western Empire as a whole, which is like strings across Europe, North America, like Australia, right? Where and like us bringing in laws from these international bodies like this, I think showcases that in such a clear way of where we're moving.
And it definitely shows like that there isn't really a difference for the kind of people who write this law, right? And your average everyday American who really sees a huge difference between us and Australia and Israel and these other places. So there's definitely a difference in vision. Oftentimes there's a lot of panic, especially amongst the right, of like, oh, this judge one time referred to, like an international court said something one time, and therefore we have a world government. And there's a lot of panicky overreaction to that stuff. But, you know, I can understand the fear because you don't want to lose your sovereignty, right? The whole idea
it's like political globalism.
We don't have sovereignty right now, to be clear. We're not losing anything. Our sovereignty is already just gone, right? The average American is... if Congress doesn't know what the Central Intelligence Agency can do or can talk about it, how do they vote?
We have no agency over it.
Right. We have no control over the executive branch whatsoever.
Well, and that just showcases how much of a mythology democracy is, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't... A true democracy, you would expect to be able to have knowledge on what you're voting for. But now we're just kind of like, well, let's just go with this guy. Like that's the way that we're supposed to go with it.
We do it as a popularity contest rather than an actual talk about policy. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't have democracy or we shouldn't have any of these things and institutions. Yeah, fine. We could debate that. Well, at least it opens the debate. But what it says at a minimum is, gosh, guys, we're a long ways from anything where you can clearly say the popular will is being implemented via this thing, because maybe you can't have a popular will amongst 350 million people. There's no through line that gets through there.
I'm just gonna get way ahead of the conservatives watching this audience. We're not a democracy. We're a republic.
Representative.
Whatever any of these words mean. Like,
right. Well, so I mean, what then are people to take away from this? Because I mean, these last few minutes have been a relatively like nihilist kind of black pill moment where we're just frankly talking about the fact that we have no control over the government that supposedly represents us. So what's our recourse here?
It's kind of the through point between both stories, right? The CIA is so insulated from any kind of consequence, they could lie to the president, right? That's the first story. Second story, Congress is so insulated from any electoral consequence from their actions that they can vote overwhelmingly to place an international foreign body in charge of parts of the U.S. code with no consequence.
And control over language.
Control over the language of what defines that. And not to mention something that probably will have direct First Amendment impacts on students' ability to speak on campus.
Well, and these are probably going to have down the road effects too, because like they're going to start getting enshrined into other areas outside of college campuses, and like probably like hiring codes and like all these different things, how you regulate speech, internet stuff. It's probably going to continue to be downstream, right?
So what then, I mean, does the Supreme Court weigh in on this? I imagine this will be challenged by someone.
Yeah, but Title VI has been confirmed, and it already has some speech implications, and it was confirmed by the.
If Title VI was confirmed, but new things are added, can it be?
Oh yeah, okay. Especially the new things. But I'm just saying, like the existing. Keep in mind that judiciary tend to build on stare decisis, meaning referring to the older case, right? You want to build a consistency of case decisions over time. That's what creates confidence in the legal code, right? So if it really has to show a departure from the rationale of the previous Title VI decisions in the new anti-Semitism thing. I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer, and I haven't looked at this. I haven't done enough research to figure it out. But the question is just, this court might have more things to say too than prior courts do if it gets all the way to the Supreme Court. Will it in time to matter?
Title VI is part of the Civil Rights Act, right?
In time to matter for the election, you mean?
For the time frame where criticism of Israel is relevant.
I think we just keep piling things into the Civil Rights Act. Just over time, we just keep piling more and more things, and that's going to be the future of how that goes.
That is the history, is just pile on more laws.
So the other part of that I do want to address too, just to make sure before we close anything out, is that there's no doubt that there are some examples of harassment that are happening on campus. How to handle this. Don't handle it like a collectivist, right? Don't crack down on all protesters. Figure out, ban face masks on campus so you can know who's doing what and then follow up with the individuals at play who are violating campus student code.
Makes sense.
How dare you?
I know, it's far too rational, David.
Yeah, right. If someone's blocking someone from getting onto campus, that's against student code. Right. So you arrest those students, not anyone who's wearing a Palestine shirt. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that speaks to a video I think we've probably all seen from, I think it was the University of Washington campus, where a Jewish student was, I think, walking carrying an Israeli flag and was surrounded, quote unquote, peacefully by protesters linking arms, preventing him from literally going the direction he wanted to go through campus.
Yeah, and that the funny thing is they'll claim that's nonviolent.
Right. Like, we're being peaceful. We're being peaceful. We're not touching you. We're not harming you, but they are inhibiting his movement.
It's kind of like blocking roads, right?
Sure.
Like, that's probably worse, actually. That causes harm, like real harm. Right.
Well, and it's a direct...
to regular people.
It's a direct action against a single individual. It's impeding their liberty to move, I guess.
Right. You have especially if you... In theory, if it's a public campus, everyone has a right to access that campus. You limiting someone else's rights to that campus is, in that sense, an aggression. If you owned your house and I put a fence around the outside of it and I said you can't get access to it,
or you can't leave,
or you can't leave, that would be an aggression. So no, and I think there are cases there, and there are places for the police, campus police, to do things in that space. I'm not saying that. I'm not legitimating any amount of violence on either side of it. I'm saying the individuals at play are guilty, not the groups. And lastly, like the Tom Cotton stuff, like that does not help. It makes everything worse. If you just say everyone you don't like is a terrorist, that only makes everything worse. And that is another action, or reaction is the action sort of phenomena, right? You're trying to provoke people into a worse and worse situation in a degrading escalatory spiral rhetorically. We need to stop that. We should have a higher standard than that. We should say, hey, you guys should... actually engage where people are at, where they have concerns about the way this war is being waged. We should debate that.
You did suggest banning face masks on campus, and I just thought that would be ironic.
Yeah, right? That would be great.
I think that would be funny.
Well, I've heard that one of the problems, or the reasons why they have to do this whole like crackdown on the Palestinian side is because a lot of them either are wearing the I forget what they're called, the kind of head wraps that oftentimes cover the face. What is it? It starts with a K. What word am I looking for here?
We'll find it. But they're concealing their identities, so they have no idea who these people are.
Or it's medical, like COVID masks, right? So because they're all super progressives, right? So it's like, and then lastly, there's been a lot of exaggerated reporting to try to create a reaction, right? A crackdown. And if this is responding to that, that's a real tragedy, right? If you have somebody who's Israeli or supportive of that or Jewish or whatever and really wants to set these people up as to get internet clout to cast themselves as a victim, and then says, oh, they stabbed me in the eye with a flag, and then the next day they're on television, their eye's not bruised at all and they look just fine. Well, maybe stabbed me in the eye wasn't the right words to use. Maybe I got poked in the eye, right? There's a difference between a stabbing and a poking, right? So like
you're acting like the truth matters in these moments.
Right.
People are pushing for their ends, right?
That's my beef, right? Handle the truth. Is they're lying to us in order to create a response, and this is the response that they want, where Congress passes a goddamn law to put put a foreign body in charge of our code. To say what's anti-Semitism. Well, it's just not gonna. It's a terrible direction.
Well, it's like guys like Tom Cotton, they're playing their role. Like it doesn't matter what the truth is. He's trying to get certain policy ends at the end of the day, right? And he's always been a neocon for Israel at the end of the day. So he's whatever he can use, he's going to use it. That's right. And that's why a lot of these protests, like that's my concern with protests in general, is like sometimes they're really good. Like sometimes the Martin Luther King stuff, like they work, right? But you kind of need like very specific moments and specific strategies. If you're just kind of protesting at large, you're going to have people that cause problems, and those people are going to be used on the other side to go against you and to get laws passed and things like that. So it's like you got to be very careful with how you approach these types of stuff.
Yeah. And if you listen to their side, they're saying they are. If you listen to their side, they're saying we're nonviolent, we're peaceful, we're trying to keep it all there. There's a couple bad apples, we try to push them out. Like it's just You just can't have a mass movement without having people who are going to give you problems on the inside. So how do you self-police? How do you handle that? It's a very difficult question.
Well, and there's also elements too. Is like there could be people purposely instigating things too. Like there's always that type of idea, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of those thoughts around things like January 6th. Like that would probably be the biggest example of a protest gone wrong in recent years, right? Where it looks like you have certain people that are instigating things, and there's probably a lot of that's going on too, because people are trying to move towards specific ends.
Yeah, instigators, no small part of that.
Yeah.
Or agent provocateurs.
Yeah, agent provocateurs for whatever organizations, right?
David, the head wrap is called a keffia.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
I knew it started with a K.
Yeah, good one.
Words.
See, I feel like if people actually really wanted to bring violence against someone, you just have to point at him and say, "He's a Boeing whistleblower."
Oh, transition.
Oh, no,
got him.
Well, I did not kill myself.
So infected already?
So a second Boeing whistleblower died, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the deal here?
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
Okay, so it could be an entirely coincidental thing. This gentleman who passed away recently, tragically, was 45 and in generally good health, became ill with a rapidly spreading infection. I believe it was MRSA, which became pneumonia, deteriorated rapidly and passed away. Super tragic. This guy worked for a contractor, a sort of a spin out of Boeing, Spirit Aerosystems. They make parts for Boeing. He came forward to that company a few years ago, and brought some concerns about flaws in bolt holes being drilled in Boeing fuselages, specifically on the 737 platform. And his concerns were kind of kept under wraps within the company until they had to come forward with Boeing to say that they had some production delays based on some of these problems with their parts. So, obviously, I mean, this is a trend that we've obviously been identifying for a while now, with Boeing having serious problems and also covering them up systematically through their company.
Yeah, and his name was Joshua Dean, 45 years old, former quality auditor at Boeing.
At Spirit Aerosystems, yeah.
At Boeing supplier Spirit Aerosystems, sorry.
So the question on my mind is, can one be accidentally, intentionally infected with MRSA because he's an inconvenient individual? Because that's where my conspiracy brain goes. I'm sorry, okay?
You think he got bioassassinated?
I think it's just a really terrible tragedy and also an incredible coincidence.
It is funny, and that's a conspiratorial rabbit hole on like maybe where military tech is. But I have talked with a virologist in the past who has told me that he believed that there are some sort of like biovirus type of weapons that exist. And that's a thing I don't have any way of telling, but just because you're kind of going into the conspiratorial realm, is like, maybe. I have no idea. I have no reason to believe it.
No, it definitely exists, right? Anthrax is a biological weapon.
Yeah, I guess there's that. Right?
So and then we know that. Okay, so it was banned in 1972.
Anthrax?
No, all biological weapons. But guess what the Wuhan Institute of Virology does?
I guess very specifically what I mean is like transmit through the air and target a specific person type of deal.
Yeah,
like the direct targeting of it is something that I've had somebody that would be kind of in that field has told me that is a thing, could be a thing, and may have worked on something like that. But again, like I don't know how much of that is just like,
just
and me lack of understanding type of stuff, right?
So what we do know, as far as for assassinating, like for example, let me get it up here. I have an example: the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko, and he was a Russian dissident, worked for the Russian Federal Security Service, and before that he was a KGB agent. And he was infected, and they say that he was like intentionally infected with a delivery mechanism of just like a needle poke that caused like, it was radioactive. It was like a small chunk of plutonium-210 injected into his body that gave him radiation sickness.
Wow.
Well,
right. So like if you could do that,
yikes.
That leaves a signature behind, right? You're now radioactive, right? The other one that you might do is a high dosage in food or in something that you're doing of a poison, right? Right. So a poison also leaves a signature, but if it's an infection, yeah.
I mean, this one is even tougher because it's so much more difficult. Like, it doesn't leave. There's not like a trail of evidence that he was injected with radioactive material or ingested a known poison. This is just like, well, he could have just gotten sick. He could have just,
but if you can give somebody a fast acting disease or something like that, I don't know.
Well, I know there's concern around this sort of thing because I believe that it's fairly well substantiated that the technology exists, and I know that there's concern around, and I don't have a ton of evidence at hand for it, but that, all of the like genetic tests that you can take, right, like the 23andMe things. One of the risks of compiling all this genetic data and giving it to a third party that it doesn't really have any like legal responsibility to retain that or keep it safe or not sell it to someone is that's a tremendous amount of data that can be ingested by an entity that may want to try to develop weapons or things that affect certain, genetic groups, right?
Certain genes are more resistant or more susceptible to various specific things, and we're moving into a pretty crazy world where who knows where we end up getting with like very specific like targeting type of weapons of just being like, no, that very specific individual, we made like a very specific, genetically encoded virus that just hits that person, and you just submit it through the airwaves, and it's just like, oh, only one person gets hit, everybody else is kind of resistant. Who knows where we end up going in that direction? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a thing or is a thing, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. Sorry, real quick. I think it was Rogan's latest episode, one of his most recent one. It might have been Tulsi Gabbard, but they were talking about 23andMe selling information to data, like DNA data
to China.
It's in their use.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's like
it's supposed to be anonymized.
Once you find out what someone's like genetic and what they have the gene for that they might be at risk of, you could absolutely start targeting based on that information.
Totally.
But you don't know individuals, right? What you're supposed to get out of that. Now, it's possible they're committing fraud, but the contractual agreement with those companies, and I know this because of a bill I worked on, is supposedly non-individuated data. It's just your demographic information. So
Allegedly.
this guy claims to be Caucasian. He has this profile, right, in this age, and this is what it is. And then you can compare that with other genetic and epigenetics of other people who've also submitted in order to do all kinds of research in that space. So
and feasibly, it doesn't even have to be that generalized. I mean, if someone can be, poked with radioactive material, someone could be poked with a medication-resistant strain of staph.
That's exactly what my point was. Is like, if you were to try to do an assassination, is it poisoning or is it infecting?
I guess it would. I mean, I don't know the technical definitions, but
poisoning is often the chemical, right? So not like a biological agent.
Yeah.
So it's more of an infection, right?
Sure, yeah.
But if you infect somebody, obviously to assassinate them, with how do you get, if something that's not normally in the lungs, you get into the lungs by getting them to breathe it in a way that you otherwise wouldn't. Like, there's all kinds of potentially novel ways to do that sort of thing. So I'm not saying that because I believe this guy was assassinated.
We're just conjecturing here.
The real question is, like, if you have means, motive, and material evidence. We have no material evidence of that. We have means. Well, I mean, to infect somebody seems like something that could be within range. Although we don't. I wasn't just on. Not as well prepared in the story as I'd like to be. Don't have any cases of the use of this specific thing to poison somebody. That said, the use of viruses, bacteria, and toxins as biological warfare on individuals, not populations, is real. I found a good article on PubMed. I'll send it over to you. The tremendous amounts of poisonings from chemical agents are very well documented. So why couldn't you do a biochemical agent?
Yeah.
And then lastly, we have motive, which is, does Boeing have a reason to do it? Yeah,
I would say so.
This guy's claim is fairly narrow, as I understand it. It's one case of the use of, it's an example of something that happened over a chunk of time some years ago of people against policy grabbing stuff out of the discard pile and putting them on airplanes. And that was probably what led to the door thing that happened on that Alaska Airlines flight some time ago.
I'm going to go a layer deeper on the conspiracy rabbit hole. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Is this concern that we're building around the safety of air travel, Boeing being the largest, manufacturer of airplanes,
where you're going with this.
something to get people to quit flying on airplanes so that we reduce our carbon footprint?
Yeah, but how will they do the chemtrails if we don't have the commercial airlines in there?
Well, they can just fly other flights.
Well,
but how is that saving on the
I was actually going to go another layer deeper than I thought you were going to. I've seen the conspiracy online that Trump's jet is a Boeing.
Oh,
so you just start to normalize
that's big programming
the failure
right
here.
Yikes.
You normalize the failure for an eventual.
It was a Boeing. They got him.
Trump malfunction. Well. Obviously, it was a Boeing. What are you going to do?
All right, let's go for a real conspiracy, which is
Lay it on us.
This week, 2 people in crypto were arrested on tax evasion.
Yeah.
Right on the heels of our conversation around financial privacy as well.
Well, and especially because there were arrests that happened last week with Samurai Wallet. But so you have Mr. CZ here from Binance. He recently stepped down as CEO from Binance because all this court stuff was starting to go on. He stepped down a few months ago. But CZ, that's his initials. He's like a Chinese name that's hard to pronounce, so everybody just calls him CZ.
Yeah.
He got hit with 4 months in prison. 4.
Is that why he's holding the 4 up?
$4 billion. And there was this photo of him doing the 4 thing, so it just started becoming memed for everybody to be in solidarity with him, everybody holding up 4. Right. Man. But so he got hit with 4 months in prison and $4 billion.
In like back taxes he didn't pay or
tax
a fine
evasion type of stuff. I didn't look too deep into it, but it was one of these things where it's bound to happen, and he was targeted on this, so he got hit. He'll be back in 4 months. He was already kind of resigned. He's worth $47 billion, so it's not like it's a huge hit to him, but it does show that, this is a thing.
And he's also spending 4 months in prison for it. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like even 4 months in prison, that's no picnic. Mm-hmm. And additionally that for a victimless crime, like he just didn't pay taxes at a time when taxes on crypto was not very clear. This isn't from like last year's taxes, right? This is from years ago.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, taxes on crypto are still like
incredibly
very vague and ambiguous in a lot of ways. Yeah. It's a lot better than it was. Like we actually kind of understand the regulations a lot more than we used to, but it's still just crazy.
We also have this one from, I'll put it in here for you, from Kurt on the Kurt Worker.
Yeah, Kurt Worker Jr.
Yeah.
Friend of the show.
Yeah, we interviewed him on Roger Vere's arresting. He was arrested in Spain for failing to pay the IRS capital gains taxes in 2018 for Bitcoins he sold in 2017. He's arrested this year for that.
Well, and that's the big thing too. So the interesting thing is that Roger's no longer an American citizen too.
Right.
Which
he stopped being a citizen in 2014. But the IRS determined that the coins Roger held in corporate entities cost them nearly $50 million that should have been declared as an exit tax on the way out, as he no longer became a U.S. citizen. So when you leave U.S. citizenship, you have this exit tax to try to suck any more value out before you leave out the door.
Let me explain who Roger is too, because he's an interesting figure in the crypto space. He used to be really like the main character in crypto. He was nicknamed like Bitcoin Jesus. He was like one of the very early entrepreneurial adopters, like starting to use it for like entrepreneurial side, not just like, it stopped being just like an experiment, and it started being like, oh, maybe there's like a use case. And he was kind of like one of the original people. So he used to be one of the main characters of crypto. He's fallen off a lot in recent years, largely because of the block size wars in 2017. But we don't have to get down in that rabbit hole. But he was running for an office in California a long time ago as a libertarian at one point. And he was giving a speech, and he was talking about how the ATF folks at Waco were a bunch of jackbooted thugs. Well, it turned out there was a bunch of like ATF people in the audience, and they ended up pretty much going after him, and he ended up getting charged with illegally selling fireworks on eBay. He's the only person in America ever to be have been hit with this charge, because everybody was like, tons of people were selling fireworks on eBay at the time, and then he ended up getting a bunch of years in jail during that time. And then when he came out and he decided to renounce his citizenship, and that's when he moved to like Tokyo and St. Kitts, and he gave up his American citizenship. So like there's like an interesting, I don't know, it's just like an interesting character. Right. And then putting this into here where he failed to pay capital gains taxes back in 2017 when he was already no longer an American citizen. You know, it gets into, it's just, it's rough, right?
Yeah. Other context on him, he's a Bitcoin Cash guy. He's a huge player in the pro jiu-jitsu scene. And just, I really like him. His interviews are really excellent. He's a great advocate for Bitcoin and for financial freedom.
Him in 2016 was probably one of the people that radicalized me on crypto. Like he's probably one of the main figures back in 2016 that radicalized me. Just because he was going on like the Libertarian podcast, and he has a very Rothbardian vision of crypto. So yeah, it's
poor guy.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Bullshit. And arrested in Spain. Never go to Spain.
I want to note here, we've got a live on X next to this tweet we have pulled up. Alex Jones is hosting his show. Alex Jones has confirmed that the globalist deep state has already set in motion civil unrest leading to civil war and what I assume is martial law. It's cut off.
That's pretty much what I said earlier about the protests right now, right?
We're way ahead of you,
I think we're seeing it happen. Yeah.
We'll see.
Alex Jones, if you want to come on the show, call us up.
So another component that's kind of still developing based upon prior reporting that I wanted to circle on was, you guys remember Gamergate?
I've heard of it.
How can I forget?
We were talking about Gamergate. It kind of like came back up with Sweet Baby... Wait?
Ray's.
Sweet Baby Inc.
Sweet Baby Inc. Sweet Baby Ray's. I was going to say the barbecue sauce too. Delicious. All right, so Sweet Baby Inc. Well, the new kind of era has come about, and I haven't really seen anyone cover it, and I think it's a very interesting part of this. So, okay, so you have intellectual property, right, which is like this particular vertical of, in the fantasy and fiction world, all this lore that goes with a given world. Warhammer 40K. So Henry Cavill wants to make a Warhammer 40K movie, and he's going to make it based upon the human faction, as like told from their point of view, because there's like a bunch of different factions in Warhammer. And part of that is what's called the Custodes, right? Which is a group of elite soldiers for this intergalactic war happening in this grim dark universe called Warhammer 40K. He wants to make this movie. He goes to Amazon. He kind of like spills the beans, and apparently they're in a terrible negotiating position for this movie because of Henry Cavill spilling the beans earlier that they're going to make it. So there's a lot of like, we have to make this movie because the fans are excited. And Amazon insists that basically they have to have editorial decision making in how the movie's going to be made and production decision making part of that. So none of this is known, right? But what recently came out is that they suddenly all of a sudden just started making characters female that wouldn't have been female before, specifically in this human faction of the Custodes. So this new faction suddenly is now allowed to have females, when for almost 30 years
part of the lore
it's all been dudes, right? It's a brotherhood of this group, and now it's just like no longer really a brotherhood, and they just kind of retcon it without telling anybody.
What's that?
Basically they just go back and just kind of scrub the Wikipedia page.
They like rewrite the history.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically. And like all these, of course, autistic nerds see it and they go like, what's going on here? And like, why are you changing things? And like, we're not changing anything. Shut up. And they
it's
literally
always been that
it.
way. It's gaslighting.
Yeah. They literally say, no, they've always been that way. And then like all these people are like, no, they haven't. They're like showing screenshots, and they're showing like old magazine articles about these things, because it goes way back to like a pre-digital age when these things were created. And so this whole thing. And so what comes out is, this is very interesting to me. Amazon said, no, you have to have females in this role. And they're like, well, none of the Custodes are female. It's an all-male organization. There is a female organization for the human faction. It's called the Sisters of Silence or something like that, because it's grimdark. In grimdark, you don't have egalitarianism. You have autarky and like domination and control. Like that's how the whole human world is.
It's part of a theme of the entire thing. Right?
Yeah, right. It's part of your symbolism. There's a whole like grimness of the universe sort of thing that they're trying to draw on to do that. So you're not trying to build the world we live in, you're trying to build a grimdark world, right? So Amazon says, no, you have to have a female lead in this part, or the movie's not going forward. And then, at least that's theorized. And then that goes to Games Workshop, and then they go back and they start retconning and changing things in the background.
And Games Workshop is one of these Sweet Baby Inc. type orgs where they...
No, we don't know that they have any connection to any of the narrative organizations. Their own gamers hate them for all kinds of other reasons that we don't have to get into, but they have the rights to the Warhammer 40K franchise.
I see.
Yeah, they control that.
Well, it's the frustrating thing. Like, if you were to make, say, a movie that goes back like 2,000 years ago, and you're just making an army, and then you have an Amazon, you have like let's say 300. Well, we have to have equal representation, so 150 of those 300 now have to be female. Right? like that's the type of stuff that we're talking about here, where it's just like, but that's just not. It's just not like the gritty realism of what happened or of what makes sense for the story, right?
Right.
Like, it's frustrating.
And it's what it shows, and I think it's why it's important and why I want to talk about it here as a continue the story is, one, this isn't just one off that happened with Sweet Baby Inc. and kind of like the rebellion there. That's still developing too. They've launched like a whole website to track this whole thing. I can't remember what the website is right now. They're still developing, and there's still like a narrative being built on the Gamergate side of it when it comes to holding these narrative groups accountable. But also that we're seeing kind of where ESG is filtering into these live game boards and storytelling mechanisms through organizations like Amazon, right? Because the reason why Amazon wants to do it, why do they want to do it? Well, it's so that they can then pitch this as one of their series that's going to lift up females and all this kind of stuff, so that they can make sure they have.
They got to get that S on the ESG score.
Yeah, and that's and then when people say like, oh, why are you all freaking out about ESGs all the time? Why are you drawing so much attention to it? Well, this is a great example.
Yeah, it influences everything. It hits everything, because every major corporation that's a part of our everyday life, you know, and a lot of our entertainment and the things that build our culture, like Amazon and Netflix and all this stuff, like they're all being impacted all by these things, and these have downstream effects because they influence culture, and then they affect the next generations, and then they push things forward, and they also create malinvestments, and they make things worse. It just never-ending loop.
And I think a big part of this, that in order for us to make the case so that we can really win this in the long run in our advocacy against ESG, is to bring up these and flag these examples over time. So that way we can create a great here are all the examples video of all the reasons why ESG, when it's relevant in the news, of examples of ESG basically just manipulating things top down for the over-financialization of everything into the ESG financial system.
I think one thing to point out too, to understand the broader context of all this, is in the form of a video that our friend Brad shared with one of our chat groups, where I believe it was James Lindsay was addressing the EU, talking about how modern day wokeism is sort of just a reinvention of Marxism designed to take down Western culture. And really fascinating video. We should make sure that ends up in the show notes, because it's about 20-30 minutes long, but really, really fascinating. And James Lindsay just details the whole lineage of Marxism and how it's kind of evolved over time. It's absolutely fascinating to watch.
Anyway, so let's one more. So we got Trump and the LP. I have a great summary of the whole story.
Are we just doing one more? Do we want to pick a spicy, like a very specific one?
No, we don't have to just do one more.
Okay.
You
just said one more. So
oh, sorry. Well, that just mean and at least one more.
Continuing on.
That's not all.
But wait.
I told you had lots of little stories to go on the end on here.
Yeah. So in the libertarian world, I know there's been a lot of kerfluffle about this right now, where so I guess Donald Trump is going to be speaking at the Libertarian Party National Convention and kind of courting them for their vote, right?
Well, to put
we'll
a
see
little
if it's
bit
a courting or not.
To put a little bit more context behind it, the LP reached out to both President Biden and former President Trump, asking them to come address the LP National Convention. I don't believe there's been a response from the Biden administration.
I wouldn't expect one.
And I wouldn't expect one. But President Trump did agree
Is
to come
RFK
speak.
going?
I'm not sure if he was asked to join.
There was a point in time where he was kind of possibly seeking the libertarian, like to go under the Libertarian Party.
Right, to run as a libertarian.
He was invited, but he didn't accept.
He didn't accept. Well, yeah, I
don't think that a lot of libertarians accepted either.
Well, yeah, because a lot of libertarians really liked him until October 7th.
Well, I mean, but there are many other things in his platform that I don't think really represent the libertarian ethos or the platform. But so anyway, the LP invited both of them, and President Trump accepted. And then obviously this has caused a lot of, debate, heated debate within libertarian circles as to whether or not he should. Is this the libertarians pandering? Is this the Mises Caucus, as Dave Smith put it in a tweet, sort of trying to basically tank the Libertarian Party and elevate Trump? He was obviously refuting that in his tweet. He doesn't think that's the case. Or there's the other perspective that this is a really rational, reasonable thing for the LP to do, to try to, become more relevant as a political force, bring Trump in to speak to the convention, and hopefully try to have some kind of dialogue and influence over the direction of mainstream, political discourse, and maybe have a little bit of impact on the platform. So
no, we don't have to do the video. You just summarized it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you just did the video for us.
Excellent.
So, no problem.
Yeah.
That's really the question. Is this pandering? I think that you're right. Is this pandering to Trump, or is this getting Trump to pander to the LP?
Well, I think that it's clear. I mean, it's always been a part of the narrative that the LP plays the spoiler, right? Libertarians, third parties in general, play the spoiler. It's always the LP that gets kind of the blame for that.
It's because they're the biggest one, of the third parties.
Right. And so basically meaning, for those that may not understand the context of what a spoiler is in this situation, there's a large enough percentage of third-party libertarian voters that are broader than the margin of a lot of elections between Republicans and Democrats. So if libertarians don't vote libertarian on principle and they just quash their principled stance and vote for the Republican candidate, then the Republican candidate beats the Democrat and everybody wins, right? I mean, that's not the way libertarians think, and I don't think that's a valid way to look at this. But I do think that there's value in, as you said at the very outset of this podcast over a year ago, talking about how the Libertarian Party can be most relevant by engaging and playing ball politically with the two major parties, and understanding where we can agree and where we can maybe move the needle closer towards our ideal outcome, without being so purist that we're unwilling to deal with anybody and just kind of resolve to being irrelevant forever.
Yeah, there's a game theory question that exists in here. Like, there is a don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Maybe have some game theory. Maybe this allows some sort of seat at the table in like hiring decisions or anything like that, of being and that's where it is for me, where I think that it is a wise decision to invite both of the major candidates, who are obviously, one of them is going to be the victor, right? Unless something crazy happens. But like, these are the two main people, and Trump has a lot of alignment, like a lot of general alignment with the libertarian ethos at large, I would say. There's definitely policy disagreements that exist all over the place, right? But if you can get it, be like, oh, well, these are important people that you should think about for cabinet decisions. Like, here's some good people that would be good for, heading up the DOJ or heading up like fiscal policy or something like that.
Ron Paul for Fed chair, for example.
Yeah, or getting the correct people in place and having that dialogue, that open, as part of the big tent of being like, we can get you, we're 4%, 5% of the vote in the election, and that's very important. You need us. We want say in the decision making on certain areas, or we want to be part of that discussion. Like, I think that makes total sense just from a game theory perspective.
So Angela McArdle, in announcing this May 1st, said, "For 50 years, we've been trying to get our candidates on the main stage with major party POTUS candidates, President of the United States candidates, and we finally succeeded in bringing one to our stage. We will do everything in our power to use this incredible opportunity to advance the message of liberty." Now, what's interesting here is the difference in vision. She's doing this for the message of liberty, right? Not doing it to get a libertarian elected as president. And that is the difference in vision, I think, between the Mises Caucus as having a broader vision of the LP, as both like getting candidates in place,
than just electioneering,
and creating a movement of persuading people to the libertarian philosophy. And then there's the kind of like the overlap there, where it's like, okay, how much can we do both, and how much can we bias towards one or the other? And when doing this, it seems to me pretty obvious that she's following through on the thing that she said she would do as chair, which is more the vision of trying to create a movement. And then she's been kind of hit with some peculiar reporting since then, such as Matt Walsh's tweet, as a quote, but there's lots of ellipses here. "My loyalty has to be to the Libertarian Party, ellipses." So ... There's a bunch of information there. "But Donald Trump is a much better person and president than Joe Biden." Libertarian Party chair Angela McArdle.
Okay, so that's
right?
About as like
even
out
with the
of
ellipses,
context
I agree with that.
So what's interesting is what that would make you think is that she's making this the official policy of the LP when what she's doing, she's actually commenting on her personal preferences.
Right.
Is that she believes that of these two, much like a former LP a vice presidential candidate said that his personal preference was to have Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump, where a lot of people, because Hillary Clinton's a nice person.
Bill Weld.
Wow.
Well, Bill Weld also went on TV and said, and this was after the election. It's actually when he just went back into neocon politics after coming to the LP. He went on TV after Trump won and saying, well, Trump said all this stuff, and it's like Russia, 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 and that's treason, and the penalty for treason is death. Like he went on TV and said that, right?
Yeah.
And
so this
and he being part of the conversation during the Libertarian Party candidacy as the VP pick in 2016 is what sparked the Libertarian takeover from the Mises Caucus. Like the Mises Caucus stuff didn't happen until after the Johnson-Weld ticket in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious. There are other perspectives on this. We were discussing this with our friend Kendall, and his view is more that the Libertarian Party should be more of a stark difference to the Republicans and the Democrats, to be something that is distinct and different and a true third choice for voters. Is there validity to that? What do you think about that, Kyle?
I think it all comes down to game theory and where you see things on this. I think you can do both. Like, I think you can do both. But also, the Libertarians don't really have a real valid candidate in my mind in this current election. Like, there's nobody that's really like a good cultural force, because what you need is a good cultural figurehead. And I think this would have been different if Dave Smith was running, which was kind of because he's Mr. Libertarian now, right? Like he's the most normalized name in popular culture around libertarianism as like a current figure, I would say. I don't think there is anybody different. Like he's the biggest communicator for it.
I agree.
If it was him, I think there would be a much different story here. But because there's not a big cultural figurehead right now, I think the proper game theory for this election is to get a seat at the table with the person who has so much of the cultural energy, which is Trump. I think that is the clear strategic place. And being very clear about what you're doing. Like don't be like, yeah, we're Trump no matter what. Just like there's certain areas where we agree with him and we want to influence those certain things. It's like trying to get because you have a lot of people formalizing around Trump. Like you have Vivek Ramaswamy, you have Tulsi Gabbard, you have a bunch of different types of people all coming in, and they're all taking influential roles within this and kind of having their cultural weight.
What role has Tulsi Gabbard taken surrounding Trump?
I think she's the VP pick.
You think so?
Yeah, I think that's why she's going on all the podcasts right now with their book tour.
That would be amazing.
And well, I mean, this has been leaked in the past, is that she's somebody that's on the top of the list for the VP candidate. Is that Trump was looking for somebody that's kind of like more democratically aligned, as like that can be a unifier, that's not on board with all the craziness of the Democrats, right?
Interesting.
That'd be great for the foreign policy question of it.
And it could be that she ends up being some cabinet position, but when it comes to the foreign policy side, but I think she's very likely the VP pick, and I think it's been chosen. That's my guess right now.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of I categorize parties as doing X sort of thing, and Libertarian Party means they're doing X, so if they're not doing X, that therefore they shouldn't be doing that, right? It's like parties run candidates. LP isn't focused on running candidates, it's focused on like philosophical alignment with the larger culture. And therefore, they're not doing what parties should do, and they should go do that, right? It's kind of what's going on here in a sense, too. And I just think, like, it's just a miscategorization. Like, parties don't necessarily have to be that, right? You could take that vehicle and you can deploy it in a different way. That tool isn't just for hammering nails. You can also pull nails up. It could also be used as a weapon.
You can just make it operate like a pack, even though it's not a pack.
Exactly.
You can do a bunch of things, right?
Exactly right.
You raise a really fair point. I mean, especially around the idea of having a valid candidate. Like, if the point of a party is to run candidates, who amongst the libertarian presidential field right now is rallying people around them? I mean, I can't even, I don't know who the front runner is, and I'm like,
I think it's
closer to the LP than most people.
Right?
I would say probably, but I mean, there's like four,
I didn't realize. I actually read
candidates.
his book before I even knew who he was. He has a book on Google, and I read that, and then I was just like, oh wait, that's that dude.
Yeah.
and the point being, like, there's no it's not coalescing
Yeah.
around any one figure. And I think that you're very right. That's not necessarily the most effective use of the LP as a force in American political culture right now.
Possibly.
So
it could
how
all be,
can we
it
be
all
most
could turn out
effective?
to be wrong too. It could turn out that this is a terrible mistake, right? I don't know.
Could be.
I mean, I'll be really interested to see what the dynamic is like and what opportunities exist for there to be an exchange of ideas in this sense, or if it's just a stump speech.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that would be disappointing to me, honestly, if that was all it was.
That could be all it turns into. I wouldn't be surprised if that was
But at
the
least
case.
being in the room and being around people like that. I mean, if it is a stump speech, Trump has to be thinking about, okay, how am I gonna convince these philosophically principled people to join my coalition?
My guess is just goes up there and tells jokes. He just
does Trump stuff.
He just does Trump stuff.
The Central Intelligence Agency, not very intelligent.
Not very intelligent.
Well, and this
Fire them
is-
all.
Hey, that would get some applause on that. It's like, we're gonna get the agencies. Yeah. So, anyways, I think we've hit that one.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting overall of the dynamic, because one of the biggest things, and I think as just to put a bow on that, is the dynamic of, I think after the Trump era is over here, which we got like 4 more years of the Trump era, assuming he wins, right? And then the Trump era is going to morph into something else. And I think that there's going to be a new tense that kind of form in our political culture. And I think we're watching that transition right in this moment. And this could be the new political culture that forms. And libertarians have a seat at the table with the America Firsters, with the dissident Democrats, with a lot of the dissident like tech people. Like there's a lot of Silicon Valley tech people that are kind of like anti-Trump, but they're kind of libertarian in a lot of senses, where like, I think there's gonna be like a new morphing entity that kind of starts to exist there too. And this is kind of getting that all set. Like this is like a stake in the tent that's being built, right?
Just very early signal of it.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what else is really dumb. Jared Bernstein, the chair of the Council of Economic Affairs, he was on Twitter the other day, and we got to hit this because it's beautiful, Joe. You're going to love it.
I can't wait. I have not seen this yet. So.
Yeah, I actually haven't watched this either. We just added it to the docket right before.
Authentic reactions.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
Obviously.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets some of the language that some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds.
Sure.
Is that what they do?
Oh no! No.
They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds.
Okay.
Right? Since they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to so
what? We're right there. We're right there.
I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Because it's like the government clearly prints money. It does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So
this is incredible. I want everyone to know.
Confusing there.
Everyone has to know. Go back to his title. I want to read his title. I want to read his title. He is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors for President Biden. The chair.
This idiot. Oh, what a loser.
Oh my God.
This guy is in charge of your economy.
I think that's what they do.
Is that what they do?
Is that what they do? Yeah, I think that's what they do.
They sell bonds. Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't believe I hadn't seen that.
Okay.
It just literally hit this morning.
If you are wondering why the economy under Bidenomics is so good, you have Mr. Jared Bernstein to thank.
Okay,
Wow.
so do you guys know what MMT is?
Modern monetary theory.
Okay, all right, yeah. It's like,
why don't you describe it?
It's like if you wanted to have a court religion of the Fed, that's what MMT is.
And what are the core tenets of this religion?
Yeah, so a court religion is like when a king says, I really want to justify my policy, and so I'm going to have this person come up and they'll be like, yeah, you can divorce that lady and marry somebody else. In fact, we'll create a whole new church called the Anglican Church out of this whole idea. That's a court religion. You justify what power wants to do by putting a religious stamp of approval on it, right?
And we call that economic science here. Like that's it's trust the science, but economic form.
Yes.
Yeah, MMT is just that, but with economics.
Which basically says they can print as much money as they want because we are the world reserve currency.
It's a way to justify the policy preferences of the financial irresponsible. The Fed doesn't actually operate on MMT, right? Because if it did, we'd be suffering from tremendous inflation right now, way more than what we currently are.
Okay, I was like, wait.
Well, we are. MMT can be whatever they want it to be, though.
Yeah,
too, right. Like that's why it's so modern.
Yeah, it's modern monetary theory.
It's economic policy that mutates.
What it is it basically takes pretty much. How to describe it quickly and succinctly? It's pretty much just a novel new theory of monetary theory that basically throws out all of the core restraint of even Keynesianism out the window.
Let's reference Wikipedia for an example or a definition here. Modern monetary theory.
That's just the intelligence boys.
Is a macroeconomic theory that describes currency as a public monopoly and unemployment as evidence that a currency monopolist is overly restricting the supply of the financial assets needed to pay taxes and satisfy savings. That's boring as hell. I'm sorry.
Wait. Yeah, I told you.
Yeah, you're right.
Why did you do that? It's even a deception to relate monetary theory with unemployment. We know that's not a problem. Stagflation happened, God damn it. You can have inflation and high unemployment at the same time.
It's just transitory, though.
Man, it makes me want to drink. All right, so
those are not alcoholic, Dave.
Give me something alcoholic. I'm just saying, yeah. Anyways, that is a great video. Real quick, I want to just answer the question. Why do we borrow money that we print? Okay, so follow me along, Joe.
I have a better definition.
I want to answer this question for him.
Go for it.
Because at this point, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
MMT theory, don't trust them. All right, so why do we, the lady asked the question. I want someone to answer this for me because it has been answered. She just doesn't know probably about the Austrians and about the neoclassical rationale for money, right? Money is a signal, right? We talk about money as a signal all the time, like the price mechanism, and money is like a signal for that. But money is also a signal for value that has been created, right? Previously in the economy. So are you familiar with the word Say's Law before? Have I ever talked about that before?
Why don't we recap?
You have to make it before you can buy it.
Yeah.
Very simple, right?
You have to first produce before you can consume.
Keynes is like, I don't understand this. That can't possibly be true, right?
Because Keynesians believe that consumption is the primary driver of the economy.
Yes, right. But it's actually the other way around. Production's a primary driver because if you wind up on a desert island, if two people wind up a desert island, I have to make something to trade it with you before you can buy something, right?
Fact.
If you're fishing and I'm building shelters, I can't trade those things without also first building the shelter, right?
Yeah.
So the money is a stand-in for that process of barter that would normally happen for a representation of value or productivity that's happened previously in the economy. So when she says, well, we create money, right? The Treasury literally just makes dollars and distributes them in cash.
Money printer go burr.
Right, in the economy, right?
Yeah.
And then the Fed buys and sells Treasury bonds that then are the foundation of the monetary system through the creation of new money and credit by selling Treasury bonds that expand the money supply. Why do we do that? No one can find that. Well, the reason why we do that is so that we can finance things without having to back it by anything, right? That's why we do it, right? Is so that we can deficitly finance. And why do we do that in the for the MMT's like question of that is because we are trying to reject the reality that you have to make something before you can consume something. We want to live on a free lunch. So that's why we do it. And why not just print the money in the first place? Well, because if you're selling Treasury bonds, then at least you're connecting it some way, some tangible way to the future ability to tax the American people for the value they create and have to repay at some point. You have to try some connection between your money and actual productivity. Because if you just print it without any of that connection, you can get really bad results, right? A flight away from your money.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to actually connect it to actual economic activity.
So taxation is the connection between the infinite printing of money and real value.
Yeah, and our ability to pay the interest on the debt.
Because the people that create the real value are being taxed, and that's where the value is being associated.
Yes, for the treasury bonds return, right? That when that treasury bond comes to maturity, you're going to be able to turn that in, and it'll be paid back with that interest on the debt.
Do they sell treasury bonds? I think they sell treasury bonds.
Is that what they do?
Well, a lot of this guy kept saying, well, there's very difficult language here. It's like all obfuscated. It's very difficult language. It's hard to remember all the things. But it reminded me of when Balaji Srinivasan was reporting last year on the banker fallouts that were happening. You had Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, all this stuff. He was just bringing up like their financial docs and saying like, no, it was right here. It was it was actually transparent here all along. That you could see that these banks were insolvent, and just like one little domino flips and everything falls apart, but it's all stuck in this banker encoded language. So just a normal person looking at it, or even just people that are being like, yeah, everything looks good. Like people that are supposed to, they have these very specific language points where it's just like, it's very boring. It's very obscure. It's very obfuscated. You can't really tell. But if you actually read between the lines, it's like, oh yeah, they are insolvent. Right? But it just reminded me of this guy being like, it's all very complicated language, right?
Very complicated. Extremely complicated. You would never understand. You shouldn't even pay attention to it. Just go back to doing whatever you were doing.
You're wrong! That's all you need to know.
That one hits hard.
I want to, maybe we can finish on this one. I want to do the Bukele video, because I think there's some interesting things for us to vibe off of as we talk about the falling apart and corruption in our society. We can go over and look over at El Salvador
society.
How are they doing?
Right now. How are they? We got this qualified person over here. One question: Do you think he talks like that just because he's part of that team? Right, like the Biden team's like, wait, you can talk? You can't be part of this. You gotta
like, look, we all have to kind of bring it down to President Joe's level here. We don't want to make him look bad.
Let's see what a confident president sounds like.
Okay, so we've talked about Bukele a lot. One of the several Central and South American dictators that we keep saying presidents that we've talked about quite a bit on the podcast, but he has drastically changed El Salvador around from being one of the highest crime rate countries in the world to being one of the lowest crime rate countries in the world. And just within his, he's had 2 terms. This is the second term of his presidency right now. So I will translate over what he says, but I just found this to be very interesting, and maybe we could use a little bit of this in our society. So, oh wait, let me actually get the volume down on this, just so
you could probably just mute it almost.
I'll do it just like very low, very low.
Yeah.
So he says, in fact, you can see that everyone here is from the executive branch. And for those that are listening right here, he's brought in everybody from his executive branch into a meeting right now. From the executive branch that I oversee, except for one person, the Attorney General. He's not part of the executive branch, but he's here for a simple reason. I want to ask him publicly to investigate everyone sitting here.
Oh.
Retroactively and into the future. I imagine that there should be no problem with that. Someone once asked me, "Are you afraid of death?" I said, "Of course, nobody wants to die. I don't want to die. But I know that I'll die someday, like everybody else. Death is the one thing we can't escape. 100 years from now, none of us here will still be alive. None of us. Nobody sitting here. It's very likely that nobody here knows their grandfather's father's name. But if there is one thing I fear, it's leaving a bad legacy. There are some presidents, some in prison, and some on the run. But the most are remembered as criminals. That's not how I want to be remembered. So I don't steal. because I don't want to be remembered as a criminal or as corrupt. But for one president, President Durate, people back then used to say, the president isn't a thief, but he surrounded himself with thieves. There was a time when he offered hope for the Salvadoran people. But even if it's true he didn't steal, then he was foolish because he was the people's hope. He didn't touch a cent and still stained his legacy by surrounding himself with thieves. That won't happen to me. I won't be the president that didn't steal but was surrounded by criminals. I want to be remembered for the president who didn't steal and didn't let anybody else steal either. There are a couple who are already there, but...
That really represents like what you were kind of talking about last week on the podcast, where you were like, God damn it, why can't we get one thing that the American people actually want? One piece of something that looks like
that was
real,
our first
authentic,
Joe freakout. It was great.
Yeah, you did freak out.
Real integrity, real actual priorities that matter to the American people to happen. Why can't we get that for once? And it kind of shows like the opposite part of that, at least for the Salvadorian concern about corruption and things like that, that they have someone maybe they can believe in, that idea of hope, the idea that there can be leadership that's authentic and real and actually cares about doing the right thing.
Yeah, it really does, I think, illustrate the difference in where El Salvador has been and where it's going versus where we have been and where we're going. You know, it's I think exemplary of the you know, hard times make strong men make good times make weak men make hard times, right? They're coming out of hard times. That El Salvador has not been in a good place, but it's obviously brought them to the place where they realize they need to make a change. They've elected a strong leader who's able to make those changes, and he's doing so, and he's moving the country in a positive direction. And unfortunately, it appears that we're on the other side of that cycle.
And he's very well liked by his people, and he was voted in by third party. And those parties that were set up largely by the American foreign policy apparatus beforehand. A lot of Reagan shenanigans that happened with the current state of El Salvador and how it was, and then this was like a third party resistance to it.
You don't say that.
You're not supposed to say that.
Yeah,
don't be noticing.
Don't be noticing. Well, I mean, it simultaneously, you know, concerns me about where we are, but it also gives me hope that, okay, even if times are bad or getting worse or whatever they are here, that there is, you know, something on the other side that is worth having hope for.
That's always the white pill, right? The white pill is that our society has been robust, that we've survived tremendously more dangerous things than what we face right now with a senile, you know, president. We've been far closer to nuclear annihilation, to losing everything as a republic. We've been in much worse places when it comes to national corruption and things like that too. Like you're just not aware of them for the most part because we don't talk about them very much. And they're not part of the national discourse. So and it's not saying that we don't have these problems. We obviously do. It's not taking anything away from that, but it's to say that the American people, the American institutions, they can be revivified, they can be remade, they can be made stronger again. We just have to, got to trust, got to hope. We're going to have like the integrity to not give in to that voice that says, well, it's just not worth it to care anymore because it's too much energy and I can't make a difference. You can. Many droplets of rain create the storm, right? So you just got to have that kind of vision to participate in something larger.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just kind of give up on those sorts of ideals because it doesn't benefit them in the short run. Yeah. And they can, and those things can turn around. So,
well said, and a great place to end. Guys, thank you very much. David Rand, Kyle Mack, Bennett. My name's Joe Sheehan. We appreciate you for watching, and we will see you in the next episode. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Help us fight internet censorship by liking, commenting, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with your friends. To find us around the internet, visit linktree.com/humanreactionpod. And remember,
there is no question that the government prints money, and then it uses that money to yeah, I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it.